One night, a humanoid entity appears out of a bush in front of the gated property of the CEO of Big Up Telecom, Michael Allen. It pushes through the gates and knocks down the door of the property. Startled, Michael's wife goes to the entrance and sees the entity. It growls at her, "Those that are close to me, let me be sanctified, and before the congregation, let me be honored." Michael comes from the back garden and into the front room after hearing the commotion. The entity repeats the words it said to his wife and grabs Michael like a doll and pulls off his head. Michael's wife screams and the entity throws his head into the left-hand corner of the front room. It disappears. The story makes front-page news in Jamaica and the rest of the Caribbean. The traumatized wife of Michael tells police, "A dopey man blew off the head of my husband." One night, exactly 30 days after the slaughter of Michael, a second time, the entity appears out of the bush in front of the gated property of the CEO of Niceness Biscuits, Stephen Barry, pushes out the gate and knocks down the front door. Stephen rushes to the entrance with his teenage son behind him. The entity repeats the words it said in the first slaying, grabs Stephen, pulls off his head and throws it into the left-hand corner of the front room. It disappears. The traumatized son of Stephen tells police, "A dopey man come pull off the head of my father." The second killing not only makes the front page news in Jamaica, but around the world as well. They are bemused that the witnesses of the killings claim that a ghost did it. Jamaica is both terrified and intrigued because the two killed so far are prominent, wealthy men. Some claim it is a curse of the rich. One night, 30 days after the death of Stephen, a third time, the entity appears out of the bush in front of the gated property of the CEO of Top Notch Furniture, Robert Jones. It pushes through the gate and knocks down the front door of the property. Robert's dog runs to the entrance, sees the entity, and runs back into the back garden, shaking like a leaf. Robert's infant daughter is in the front room playing a video game. She had turned when the door was knocked down, and the entity repeats the words to her that it said to the other victims. Robert is in the kitchen and grabs a knife when he hears the commotion. The entity enters the kitchen and recites the words to Robert. He plunges the knife into the entity, but it goes through him like he wasn't there, and it grabs Robert, pulls off his head, and throws it into the left-hand corner of the large kitchen. It disappears. The traumatized daughter of Robert says, "Happy, Papa have me daddy head." Rich and prominent businessmen are very concerned. They pressure the police to catch and apprehend the killer. They are not convinced that it is a ghost that has carried out the slayings. The police step up patrols and increase their presence around the homes of rich businessmen. One night, 30 days after the death of Robert, a fourth time, the entity appears out of the bush in front of the gated property of Mark Richards, the CEO of Bling Motors, pushes through the gate and approaches the front door. Mark has an armed guard outside the front door. The guard tells the entity to stop and turn around, or he will have to use lethal force. The entity continues to approach and says the same words it used before the previous killings. The guard fires 3 bullets at the entity, but they go through him as if he wasn't there. It pushes the guard to the ground and knocks down the door. Mark is in the front room and has a semi-automatic rifle and empties it into the entity to no avail. The entity grabs Mark and pulls off his head and throws it into the left-hand corner of the front room. It disappears. The terrified guard, when being interviewed, exclaims, had Doppelman pop off the head of Mr. Richards. Jamaican government, security services, and army form a committee to urgently decide what to do. They all agree to the security services suggestion to put out a cover story to soothe the fears of the people, particularly the heads of businesses. The cover story is that it is a serial killer wearing extreme high quality bulletproof clothing and using a very advanced form of limb robotics to carry out the slayings. He will be stopped or arrested ASAP. All resources of the military and army will be used to reassure and protect the public. One night, 30 days after the killing of Mark, a fifth time, the entity appears out of the bushes in front of the gated property of Brian Thompson, CEO of Wicked Confectionery, and approaches the gate. An armed soldier is on guard there. He is terrified, but empties all of the round of his semi-automatic rifle into the entity to no avail. The entity repeats the words it said before the previous 4 executions and pushes the soldier to the ground. It sweeps through the gate and knocks down the door. Brian is waiting in the front room with a large cross in his hand. He shakenly points the cross towards the entity and cries, "In the name of Jesus, be gone!" The entity slaps the cross out of Brian's hand and repeats the words before grabbing him, pulling Brian's head off and throwing it into the left-hand corner of the front room. It disappears. Brian's wife investigates the commotion and sees the carnage and screams. The armed soldier comes in and exclaims, "Of course, lick off the head of Mr. Thompson." The world is horrified and gripped by the story at the same time. The Security Committee has secretly headhunted experts from the occult and religious fields. The government offers them billions of Jamaican dollars to resolve the crisis. The occultist says that she will ask the forces of darkness to reveal who is doing this and what the solution is. Darren, a Bible student, points out that the words the entity utters are very similar to the words God used in the Bible in ancient Israel to explain why he had executed the two sons of Aaron who were priests to God in the tabernacle. They offered illegitimate fire by having alcohol and being ungroomed. The committee asks if it was God's doing. Darwin rejects this, but says it's a God and it has a temple arrangement. It has executed others before who did not follow rituals correctly. Is not spontaneous human combustion and execution by an entity? The fact that the heads are thrown in the left-hand corner of the room from the direction the entity enters is proof it is a demon. They are always on the left. These victims might be members of a coven who have not done an occult ritual the proper way. The occultist returned to the committee a day later and confirmed that things were not done according to procedure in a particular coven. It needs to be corrected that night and a sacrifice offered. A senior member of the committee admits he is the next in line for death as the killings have been done in alphabetical order, 30 days apart, and all the previous victims were part of the same coven. The last coven member executes a ritual the correct way and sacrifices a chicken. He is not killed. This means the killings has stopped. The police lie and announce they believe the killer has halted the murders. He is a genius, but evil inventor that has made his point and is now satisfied. They may never know who he is, but will not stop looking for him. Darren is offered the reward since he was the first to point out the reasons for the slayings. He rejects it, laughing that JA payouts are as reliable as the Jamaican Football Federation not paying the manager of the national team. His reward is that no more lives are lost. He suggests that the committee follow Christ's commandment of worshipping in spirit and truth by becoming non-denominational Christians and keeping God's commandments.